You're listening to Double Time, your daily accessible technology show. Now, here's your hosts, Steven Scott and Shaun Preece.
Hey, Shaun Preece, how are you today?
I am mediocre, Steven Scott. How are you, sir?
Mediocre.
Well,
that's our standard, actually, so that's pretty good. That's worked out pretty well, actually.
Setting expectations right from the off.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we don't want to come on here pretending we're experts, because we're certainly not that. In fact, today we are going to talk about Android and Talkback 15, to be exact.
What?
Yeah, hang on, let me just check.
Are we on Double Tap?
This is Double Tap, right? Yes, we're going to talk about Android and Talkback 15, but you'll be pleased to hear that it's not just us talking about it, because, I think the Android people, as much as they love us, some of them, I think that, they'd probably rather hear from an expert in the field. So we're going to be talking today to John Dyer, who is part of the Blind Android Users podcast. Great bunch of guys and girls.
Yes.
We've actually had a number of the team on the show already over the years, but we've never had John on before. So John is a newbie. I believe he has just started listening to the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of them.
For how long, we'll find out. But yes, he does know his beans when it comes down to Android.
I wonder if he doesn't listen because he thinks that we're, not nice to the Android people. I want to convince him we're nice to people, and in particular the Android people.
Good luck. Android's great, which we'll find out later on.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to get into all that. Talkback 15. But look, first off, do you know what? Let's just jump right in. Let's just do it.
Oh, jingle.
Email. We get email. We get your email every day. Here's your mail today.
Yes. Thank you.
You got to do the oosh, because if you don't do the oosh...
I tried not to sing along. I tried not to bob my head, but I couldn't resist the ooft.
Yeah, because it never works out in the end when we try to sing along.
No, it's more work in the edit.
Try to sync it all back up again. Doesn't work. Yes, let's jump into the emails. Loads of you have been getting in touch with various comments. And a real mix of subjects today. We're going to kick off with Gary, who wants to talk about cooking.
Hello guys, it's Gary from Pretoria, South Africa.
Hello.
Now, out here we are all kinds of primitive, where we burn wood to cook on. We call it a braai, pronounced like fry, but with a B in front. This we do over weekends and when we are celebrating something like the fact that the sun came up that morning. We do this outside, where there are no risks of setting something alight, like a wooden deck. Here, our entertainment areas are brick or stone, like our houses, with most having built-in barbecues. As a blind person, I find this traditional method difficult, as the cooking method is visual and needs somebody with a good eye to watch the spot where on the fire the heat is the most or least, and then to turn and rotate the meat, which is anything from a mix of steak, lamb chops, chicken, sausage. We call it wors, pronounced like force, but with a W up front.
I'm getting hungry.
The best method I've come up with to date is to use a set of grids which hinge on the one end and into which the meat is clamped. The whole grid is then turned over after 3 or 4 minutes. When the amount of fat dripping out of the meat starts reducing, one can hear it dripping into the fire, the meat is basically done. That is the crude method. The most practical method for me as a visual impaired person to grill is on my Weber Genesis. With this tactile gas grid, I can manage the gas on and off, heat, turn without the fear of flames, and after a few cookouts I learned when the meat is done based on the duration and the heat setting. I also often use a Bluetooth probe called meter, which is inserted into the meat, thickest part, and then the accessible app lets me choose the type of meat, the cut, and then it will let you choose how you want it done, rare, medium, well, etc. The app then constantly monitors the meat internal temperature and the ambient temperature and estimates the cooking duration and counts down to completion.
Wow.
When the meat is done, the app will ring an alarm advising that one remove the meat from the heat and then advise to let it rest so the juices can be drawn back in. Absolutely fantastic for cuts of meat which one doesn't cook regularly, like a pork roast, leg of lamb or full-size beef fillet. As South Africa typically has summer for 9 months of the year, most of our cooking is done outside. On the odd bad day, I would cook inside on a gas hob. Simple and easy to use, and finding the spot where the pot or pan needs to stand is simple. On this, I would do the basics, like spaghetti, bangers and mash, or shepherd's pie and vegetables. By the way, my wife and children who live at home enjoy my cooking, and I do most of it even though I am totally blind. My final point is on accessible kitchen appliances. I see the way forward to be that our global manufacturers will probably invest funding into making their appliances smart rather than accessible. This is great if the app they use is accessible to the visual impaired community, like My Kitchen Kettle and Air Fryer, which both can be set, activated and monitored via their apps. And that's it. Cheers from sunny South Africa. Good luck attempting your first cook-off. From Gary Redmond.
Gary, can I ask, how much would it cost to fly you to the UK and perform this cookout action you talk about? Because I would love to try some of that.
I want a braai up. That's what I need.
I need a braai up as well. And every single thing you mentioned. I am so hungry today. I have not eaten yet today. This is not a good email to start with. You've put me in a mood.
Doesn't it show you, though, how innovative we are when it comes to sorting problems out? I mean, that clamping of the meat in between two grills there, that's a fantastic idea. And hearing the fat drip out and the less drips, the more it's done.
It's genius.
I mean, so good, so good. That's really good. And we've heard about the talking thermometers or the smart thermometers before, but that one that stays in real time and tells you exactly how long you should cook it for and when it's ready. Amazing.
I know. I love it. It was ThermoWorks, wasn't it? The one that Kayaker was telling us about on the video we did. One of our earlier videos, if you just joined us on YouTube and you've been binging some of the earlier episodes, if you go further back, you'll find some different episodes because we started on YouTube actually a few months back and we were putting up individual interviews at the time. And we did a whole thing on smart cooking, outdoors especially. We did touch on indoor cooking. That got a lot of response in that conversation. So, just one.
But again, Weber came up as one of the most accessible and easiest ways to cook outside.
Amazing idea. Amazing ideas there. It kind of makes me want to try this stuff. I don't know if I've got the confidence.
You need the weather. That's what it comes down to.
You need the weather as well. Yeah, that's so true.
Never get a chance.
No, I know. Well, summer in this country, in the UK, has been terrible. And it's funny because I find most days when I speak to my Canadian colleagues at AMI, the weather's very similar. Canada and especially Scotland in particular. I think England gets a little bit better weather. You're a little bit further south, so you get a bit more heat. You know, you're getting a little more of the steam from the kettle, shall we say?
Not much, let's say. There's no fun having a cookout, a barbecue, or a braai when you've got a woolly hat and gloves on. It somehow loses the mystique and the exoticness.
That's right, yeah. Have you ever been to an ice bar? I remember going to an ice bar in Norway.
No.
And it was the most unbelievable experience. It was great. I mean, weird.
Cold drinks.
I do like it cold. Even I thought, you know what? You could have a bit of a temperature in here.
Can you turn the heating on?
Yeah. And suddenly it just becomes a wooden room. But no, it was amazing. We should go to an ice bar. You'd love it.
Okay, let's make that happen.
Okay, excellent. Job done. Right, thank you for that. Really appreciate that, Gary. Guy's been in touch about JAWS and Teams.
Hey all, are there any updated JAWS scripts for Microsoft Teams? As of about 3 days ago, I noticed that my notifications are no longer reading as they come in. Any way to fix this? I'm running the latest JAWS 2024 and as far as I know, Teams version 2 with all the updates. Thanks so much in advance. From Guy.
I'll be honest, Guy, I'm not using Teams as much these days.
No.
I'll talk about what I'm using in a minute. But in terms of that, obviously JAWS will be updating regularly. So it's always important to make sure that you're getting your latest JAWS updates. Also, you know, that email was sent in a couple of weeks back. So I'd be interested to know, Guy, if you've had any update on that. I mean, Lisi is the one I kind of lean to in terms of patching some of the apps, I think, or at least through scripting. You know, it kind of almost patches up some of the challenges we have, makes it easier to navigate. And I know Brian's done an incredible amount of work with JAWS and the particular Lisi scripts that he sells separately, I believe, to Lisi.
Which you're loving.
Oh, it's amazing. I love it. I mean, honestly, Lisi is just the best thing. It is honestly the best thing. And it's so funny because for years, I had this idea in my head. And I'm getting a lot of that these days. I don't know if it's just...
Ideas in your head?
Yes, yes.
It's bad.
A very, very new thing for me. But I'm starting to kind of realize a lot of these things, like Lisi, I thought was a product for people who were really, like strong power users. And I guess it is. But it's actually more about simplifying the experience. But in turn, that turns you into it. Exactly. That turns you into a power user, which is kind of amazing. I never really thought about it that way.
Yeah. But I would have thought with something like not getting any notifications from an app like Teams, I would have thought that JAWS will be up on that and hopefully that will be fixed soon. I know Matt listens. Hello, Matt. So Matt wants to get in touch and update us on that. That'd be great.
And also, let's be honest, I mean, this is a Microsoft thing, right? It's forever moving. It's interesting. So you and I have been playing around with an app called, or not an app, but a service called Google Meet.
Breaking news. Yeah, I think it's been around a while.
There's another one, right? Who knew? But like last time I tried Google Meet, I had a lot of issues with it. It wasn't as, I mean, it was accessible, and again, it's that accessibility versus usability thing. But I've got to say, every bit of that was a joy to use Google Meet.
I was just going to say the same thing with the same word. It was a joy. It was just so easy to use. Everything was labeled. Everything was obvious what it actually did. I was surprised because, usually I'm using Zoom or we're using this, which is Riverside. But I was really impressed with Google Meet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Google Meet is fantastic because, it's very simple for just exactly that, just meeting. I mean, when you go in to Google Meet, you can set up an immediate meeting, an instant meeting, which then just throws you right in. Once you've obviously agreed to, camera permissions, microphone permissions, once you've done all that part, and again, all of that fully accessible, you can get on there and it's putting you right into the room. Then you can invite others. It gives you a very easy way to copy the link, send it to other people, either via the Google Meet itself or, through your own email. And, getting people into the room, again, nice and simple. I had no issues at all with it. I was so impressed.
It was a joy. We both agree.
You should check it out. It's really good. Now, Mark was traveling from Australia. He was going up, I guess. Is that right?
Up?
Because he was coming up, right, to Europe.
Oh,
so
right,
he wasn't going down under like we would go to down under in Australia. He's going under up.
Don't confuse me.
Yeah, it's very confusing. Anyway, he's back and he wants to tell us how you got on.
Hi team. Great to see the podcast and YouTube going from strength to strength, and as usual, loving the content and banter.
Thank you.
I've just come back from up over to back
up
down
over.
under
There we go.
after a great trip to Europe. I just wanted to share a couple of highlights regarding my blind travel experiences. Sala Blue Plus and Italian trains. Before going, I had used the Sala Blue Plus app to book assistance at Rome, Florence and Milan train stations. Apart from the app talking in Italian rather than English at times, the process was very easy. Possibly, though, easier to book on the desktop site than the app. The support I received getting on and off the trains was really good. A couple of points to note, though, is that not all the assistants speak English, which was fun. Also, the offices are on the platforms and not the front concourse, which made them hard to find, especially in Florence. Having said that, it was a very positive experience, especially when they could communicate with the taxi service we'd booked to confirm where they were parked, given the taxi driver couldn't speak English. Broken cane. Definitely a reminder that you should always take 2 canes.
Yep.
I broke my slim cane on the cobblestones of Germany, just after getting off a cable car ride. Luckily, I had packed 2 canes, but it was a good reminder. It also reminded me that I should have taken a spare artificial eye in case the one I have got lost or damaged. Good trick for next time. Blind man on a scenic cable car ride. Yeah, they were those 2-person gondolas. You do need to get on them quick though, otherwise they close the gate. Of course that happened to me, so I was flying solo, whilst my 2 companions were stressing out in the next car. Had a much more helpful person at the top who clearly understood what it meant when somebody had a white cane. His phone has fallen in the water. Channeling Blue Bottle from the Goons. God bless Apple. My new iPhone 15 Pro Max had a nice swim in the Ruse River in Lucerne.
Oh dear.
This was a good use case for metaglasses or equivalent. I had just crossed a bridge, and when to take my phone out to take a picture of the scene, it got caught on my shorts and overlapping t-shirt and bounced on the ground. I went to try and stop it with my foot and managed to bend it like Beckham, straight between the safety bars and into the water. Luckily, another tourist came along and was prepared to go into the water to get it for me.
Wow.
There are still good people in the world. It was about hip height, but very slippery. It was in the water for over 20 minutes. I shook the phone with the port facing down, and about 4 drops of water came out. It was still on and working. The speaker was a bit scratchy for a couple of hours, but it is still in perfect working order.
Wow.
After a good clean and leaving it and the cover to dry, all is well. I just had to politely say, "Good idea," to every second person who told me to put it into a bag of rice. So, always some fun experiences from travelling, but we enjoyed the trip very much. Keep up the good work. Regards, Mark.
Oh, thank you, Mark. That was a brilliant summary of your holiday.
So
equally as exciting as my Canadian trip.
Just so many things there that, are just so relevant to us that we completely understand. When I say us, I just mean us as a blind community. Everything there, absolutely fantastic. And I can just totally imagine that. I can relive that in my head, where you drop your phone and you put your foot out to stop it smashing on the floor or whatever, and then you just end up kicking it even further. But through the rails as well. I mean, what's the odds?
I know, it's utterly terrifying. And yes, always take a spare cane. It is the one thing I actually...
I've already got one.
Well, as you remember, I bought that one from Amazon. I have no idea, cheap and cheerful one I got. And I am keeping it as a spare. It's almost like in cars, I remember years ago, people used to tell me they'd have a spare tyre. But it wasn't like a really great tyre. It was just a tyre that got you through.
Yeah, temporary tyre.
Yeah. And that's exactly what this cane is. I don't think it would last that long. I don't know. Maybe it would last forever. I don't know. But it is always my bag, and I couldn't find it for long enough. We'd gone out to Canada, and I was at the point of the holiday where we'd gone to Alaska, and we'd just arrived in Alaska. We'd gotten to this onto the cruise ship, and we get into the and I start unpacking the bag. And we hadn't really been unpacking properly because we'd been moving so much. Every couple of days, we were always back in, cases packed and go. But this, on the cruise, we were there for 7 days. So we did like a proper unpacking. And that's when I found the cane. And I'm like, I already had it. That's exactly the noise I did. I went, like that. And that was it.
Like a crow.
Yeah, I was so excited by myself. In fact, so much so 3 other birds landed on the cruise ship. And we had a long conversation. It was like a Disney movie. But yeah, it was in my head. But fascinating. Thank you for that, Mark. I'm glad you're home safe, and glad you had a good time. Sounds like it was eventful. What amazing countries to go through. It's so funny because we're so close to Europe. And when I speak to my Canadian friends, they often say, you're so lucky. You've got all this on your doorstep. I'm like, we'll get there.
Yeah, I'll look outside of my shed every now and again, once a year or so.
I've got family in Germany. And I've never...
Have you?
I do. I've got family in Germany, and I've got family in Poland, and I've got family all over the place. And I've never been to see any of them. Mind you, they don't call me. So I'm just saying. So if you're watching German family, hello.
Guten Tag.
Guten
Turn it
Tag.
into an argument.
There you go. I'm not. I don't think I've got any German blood in me because my family all came from Poland, and let's just say they all ended up in Germany, and let's just move swiftly on. But the point is that they all live in Germany, and but it's...
Well, you should go over. It's a beautiful country.
My wife's been. She's been to Berlin, and she loved it. It's a place that I always love to go. Yeah, I should just do it. We'll go
it's
together.
Too far away. We're just talking about hospital appointments we've got coming up and how much we're dreading leaving the house. And yet you're talking about going to Germany.
It's funny though. I know we've said this before, but there are sometimes I do think to myself, it would be easier just to, fly to Germany than it would be to go to the hospital. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, it makes total sense.
Because honestly, I've started already. So a hospital appointment later today, and in my head, I've already started the process of what happens when I go through the front door. Which app will I open?
Oh, of course. Yes, it's the blind way.
Is it Seeing AI? Is it Ira? Is it Be My Eyes? Who's going to help me? If I use Be My Eyes, what if I get a volunteer who, doesn't quite get it? Oh, if I use Ira, how many minutes will I get? Will I be able to connect long enough? Oh, if I use Seeing AI, will it read the arrows? And this is all the stuff you play out in your head before you even get there.
What if I get a terrible taxi driver that just isn't very helpful at all?
Never been to this hospital. I'm going to a hospital,
private,
darling.
I see.
It's a hospital, honest. But I've never been to this hospital before. No idea what it's like. So
isn't it funny that hospitals seem to have the worst help available? Every time I've gone to a hospital and I can't find the reception, it's like, I need assistance. It's always, I don't know. We've got a porter somewhere, and
I've had 2 weird experiences. Umpteen hospitals I've been to where there are just no receptions. You just seem to walk in the door and there's no one there.
There's always a coffee shop and a magazine shop.
But most of those are now closed a lot of the times you go. I don't know why that is, but they all seem to close, or they close early, or whatever. So I've been into some hospitals.
Hotels? What's going on?
Stop this with the hotels. I'm giving it away. But no, I've been in so many hospitals where, you would swear the hospital had closed down and no one told anyone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange.
And then, the other laugh was once when I'd gone in and I was standing at what I believed to be reception. I asked if the person could help, and she said, yes, no problem. And the next minute, I was actually pushed by, on my chest and fell back into a wheelchair.
No.
Literally, like pushed into a chair.
Wow.
Which had been obviously pulled up behind me. I was pushed into it and then told, where are you going?
I can't talk to you, obviously.
No,
You're
exactly. No way
Steven
we're going to
Scott.
have a discussion or any kind of conversation that would be meaningful. No. Unbelievable.
Terrible.
But it does happen. That kind of stuff does happen. Okay, I'm trying to work out where we go next here because I'm toying with two and we've got limited time. So I don't, which one starts the least amount of conversation for us? I'm going to pick Jenine Stanley. We haven't heard from Jenine in a while. Good friend of the show. Janine's in touch about the subject of the vision spectrum, not a computer, but vision itself.
Hi, Steven and Shaun. My Ira fedora is way across the room, so you get my summer hiking hat with the super wide brim today.
Oh.
I recently read a term that made a light bulb go off over my head, on the visual spectrum. It was used to describe someone in an article. Brilliant, I thought, in part because no matter what words you use to describe that state of vision in which you are legally blind, but can still see some things, they're all negative. Low vision, partially sighted, visually impaired, all diminish what you have in favour of what the norm is, 20/20 vision. So, changing from visually impaired to low vision may highlight that you do still indeed have use of your eyes for sensory input, still frames that input as lesser. I know that the word spectrum has many meanings these days, not the least of which can be interpreted negatively. Oh, she's, lower voice, on the spectrum, meaning that the person is neurodivergent and not in a good or productive way. Let's pretend, though, that the term spectrum hasn't been corrupted. Someone who has no central vision might be on the vision spectrum. Imagine points on a line here with total blindness, no physical eyes on one end, and 20/20 vision on the other. Yes, I know. We should just get over saying the B word. Here's why we won't. Stephen's recent visit by a home repair person is a good example. As long as people are convinced that being blind is worse than being dead, it's still a forbidden word. No self-respecting baby boomer wants to call themselves blind. They might be completely unable to read any longer, but they are not that B word. Mm-hmm. Being on a vision spectrum, unless you're completely negative on the term spectrum, doesn't imply anything. You're just somewhere between darkness and light. Wait, you know what I mean. By describing your condition as being on the vision spectrum, you can tell people your experience and exact point on said spectrum. We here know that there are 1,000 flavours of low or partial vision. We also know that people with some usable vision have different issues than people who have no vision or who don't rely on what they have left. I agree with you that we need to look at employment, but within employment we also need to look at someone's career. I've left jobs because, mostly due to inaccessible software and processes, I could not be promoted or have different job responsibilities. I'm not working in the field in which I got my graduate degree either, and I'd be one of those people with said graduate degree working in a call centre. So there's unemployed and underemployed, both of which are not what we want. Now that we've solved the world's problems, it's time to thank Laura for her lovely human reading of all these great messages. I hope she too has a cool hat. Side note from Laura, I'm not a hat person, but I do have a plethora of sunglasses. Jenine, #friend of the shed, #proud to be human.
Hey, I like that. Proud to be
fantastic human. As always. I love that. It's very interesting from a... have we got time to get into this?
We don't really, unfortunately. We don't. We'll come back to this. I promise you we'll come back to this subject because that's a very interesting idea. I actually really like that. There's something about that I really like. Look, stick around because we've plenty more to talk about. But if you want to get involved in the show and have lovely Laura, who's not an AI, read out your email. How many people have to tell this to? Then
she wears sunglasses.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. She's a human. AIs don't wear sunglasses. So yes, if you want to get involved in the show, here's how.
Call the Double Tappers now, 1-877-803-4567, or email us, feedback@doubletaponair.com.
Time to Talkback and Android, and don't worry, it's okay, Shaun. It's not that you and I are going to do this. We are going to bring in an expert. On
Double Tap, are you sure?
Well, I know, it's since this whole YouTube thing, It seems to have gone up a gear. They want like experts and they want people on cameras, blind people on cameras. I mean, for goodness sake, let's bring in John Dyer. He's a Talkback expert. That's what I'm calling him. John, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm good. I hear you've just started listening to Double Tap. That's
Sorry.
okay.
No, I had to get caught up on the recent events, so I'm glad your dog is recovering.
Thank you. Oh, very good.
well
See, that was
done.
very good.
That's
very
proof.
good. The dog is absolutely
I had to
fine.
prove it, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's the marker.
Only a true listener would know this, right?
It's like the West
That's
Wing
not
episode when
tech-related.
he has to say shibboleth, or otherwise nothing will, no man shall pass, or the line was. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Anyway, John, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. And we're going to talk about Talkback 15. Now, we did talk about it last week, of course, on our Monday episode. That was following the news that Talkback 15 is rolling out. I still haven't got it here, but this is a slow rollout, and people are a bit concerned about this, but you can explain this to people, right? This is something that rolls out over a period of time by Google.
Yeah, it can take up to 2 weeks. I guess their concern is if something goes horribly wrong and everybody loses speech, they can save half of them, right? So I guess that's why it rolls out slowly. I wish it was just, like Apple does it. Of course, Apple doesn't roll out VoiceOver through the store, but if they did, everybody would get it on the same day because that's how iOS works, right? But it's a little bit different in Android land.
So tell us about Talkback 15 and what's new. I mean, I know the headline feature. We've talked about it, and you can maybe give us a bit more detail on that. The headline feature, of course, being the news that you can get image descriptions through Google Gemini. So essentially fusing the Gemini assistant into Talkback. Now, that's a pretty cool feature. And have you had a chance to play with it and try it?
Yeah, so the way it works is in the same way you would use an app like Be My AI, Be My Eyes, to describe a photo, you can just have Talkback from within itself describe whatever's within the focus. So it doesn't even have to be a photo. It could be a drop-down menu that's not being accessible on a website. It could be, a button. It could be text. Anything, whatever's in focus. You can either bring up the Talkback menu to hit describe image, or you can assign a gesture to describe image. And when you do that gesture, it will take a partial screenshot, I guess, of whatever's within that focus, send it to the Gemini servers, and you'll get back a description of what that is.
Oh, right. I was thinking it was just purely for images, but no, that takes it to a whole new level, right?
Because it doesn't make everything completely accessible, right? Because there's some apps that are just so bad you can't even get things in focus, right? But if you can get something in focus, you can get a description of it, which is awesome.
And how do you enact it? How do you get it to work? Does it automatically do it, or do you have to swipe and choose it, or do a gesture or something?
So you can tap with 3 fingers or do the old-fashioned angle gesture of swiping down then to the right to bring up the Talkback menu. And it's the first, they've moved it. It used to be way down in the menu. Now it's the first item in the menu. So it'll say describe image, and you just double tap on that. If you prefer, you can go into the settings and customize your gestures to assign it to a specific gesture. So I just have it set to a 2-finger tap for me. So that's all I have to do to describe anything at any point. Yeah.
And is it limited to just what's in focus, or can you do the entire screenshot of the entire screen?
You cannot do from within Talkback, you can't do the entire screen, but if you do have Gemini on the phone, you can ask Gemini anything about the current screen. So although that's not within Talkback, you do have that functionality, or you could just take a screenshot and well, this is how I used to do it. This is why I love this feature so much, because I used to just have to take a screenshot of the entire screen, share that screenshot with something like Be My Eyes, and then try to figure things out from there. This is much easier than that, but you still have that option if you want to get the entire screen.
And I haven't really played with Gemini much at all. What's the description like? Is it, if you compare it, I think we've all got sort of the benchmark of Be My AI, which gives a really good detailed description. What's it like compared?
It's very similar. I mean, I took a picture of my wife and son in a restaurant, and it described them, their expressions, their hair color, what was on the table, what kind of food was there. It even does, and I'm not a fan of this, it will comment on, the mood of the restaurant, or the stuff that's not details, but you know how these AI things are.
Yes.
And at this point, it doesn't seem to be tailored because, for example, if you're going to have Be My AI describe you something, the description is going to be more based on somebody who's visually impaired than if you sent that directly to ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, it seems like in this first iteration, there's really no difference. It's going to comment on the mood of the picture. It's going to, I was looking at a Mario Kart playset on Amazon, and it for whatever reason, after the description told me, this would be a great gift for any fan of the Mario franchise.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
I didn't need that information, but
Did you buy
everything else was great.
by now? Yeah, but that's, to be fair, I mean, Be My Eyes have put a lot of work into getting that tone right of who it's aimed for. Because if you ask the same question, as you say, to ChatGPT, it's all about the tuning of the prompts and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But can you interrogate it further? I mean, like Be My AI. I know we keep saying like Be My AI, and I don't mean to do that, but this is the benchmark. It seems we're kind of basing all this on. Can you interrogate
at this point,
further?
no, you can't, because I'm a little disappointed because the way old descriptions used to work is it would just say it to you, right?
Yeah.
Now it pops up a window, and the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, it's popping up a window to tell me this, so there must be an edit box I can ask a question. But no, there's not an edit box right now. Hopefully that's something they're planning on adding in the future, because that would make it great, especially because if you want the exact text out of something, it does that AI thing where it just summarizes it, and it says, if there's too much text, it says this is about the following subject, and it just kind of picks and chooses what it wants to tell you. Similar to what Shaun mentioned last week about his, I think it was last week, about the Meta AI. Like he wanted to, or the Meta glasses, he wanted to read everything on the menu, and it was just summarizing, the menu. So it sort of does that right now. You can't get it to give you the text exactly. So I would imagine if there was a prompt, you could say, just tell me the text.
So I guess my question is, would you still rather send the image to Be My AI rather than using Gemini?
It depends on the situation, really. Yeah.
Because I suppose it's like you've got this great app there that can do it, but you have to, you have to share that image with it. In some cases, that can be quite tricky to do. I mean, it could be a screenshot. That's one way of doing it. But essentially, you have to go out of the app you're in, go to another app, import the image, all that stuff. And these are time-consuming activities, right? If you just want to know what
I think
the description is.
For my workflow, it's been about, I'd say probably 90% of the time, I just do it in Talkback. If I know I'm going to want to ask something specific, I won't bother with Talkback, because I've kind of gotten used to what the description is going to be like. It's awesome in certain situations, right? But if I want to ask, if I know I'm going to need specific information, I will still use Be My AI for that.
It would be cool, I guess, if it just sent it straight over to the Gemini app and opened it as a already asked question, so you could follow on.
Yep.
Maybe that's something
that
that'll come. Yeah.
Hopefully.
So, just detaching Gemini from Talkback for a second, have you played much with it? Getting a sense of how it works and how it behaves?
I'm kind of forcing myself to.
Don't force yourself.
Yeah, because Google's doing this thing where they want Gemini to replace Google Assistant, but in its current iteration, it can't do everything Google Assistant can do. So I've been reluctant to jump over to it, but within the past month or so, I've just replaced Google Assistant, and I've gotten used to using Gemini. So I mean, it is helpful for just information. If you just want information, obviously, always double check the work, because these things can hallucinate all the time. So, but it is, if you just want to know something really quickly, it's awesome. That's what I use it for mostly. Yeah.
And how about Talkback itself? Talkback 15 specifically. So we know this is the feature that everyone's talking about, but what else has impressed you or stood out to you?
To be quite honest, nothing.
Okay.
So Talkback.
It's great talking to you, John.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll tell you what's new. This is normal with Talkback. They do not trying to think of the best way to say this. I don't think they have the manpower behind Talkback that Apple has behind VoiceOver. You're not going to see, I mean, they've caught up in recent years, right? But you're not going to see as many features added in any given release. You know, and part of that is they have usually 3 releases a year. It's not like an annual thing. But so what's new in this one is you have, so this has been kind of controversial. It's just changes. Like, it used to be if you wanted to read continuously, you would have to, when you invoked continuous reading, it would read from the next item instead of the current item. That's changed. Most people, I think, are on board with that change. They like it reading from the current item first rather than the next item, even though we've been forced to do it the other way for forever. There's a couple new gestures with Braille on-screen keyboards or Braille displays for editing gesture, like to be able to select specific. You had selection control before, but specifically now you can select from your current cursor point to the beginning or to the end. That's what's new. There's there are new Braille display commands that I honestly don't know anything about because I don't have a Braille display.
Yeah.
And then there's more granular control over punctuation. It used to be on and off. Now you can set it to all, most, or some. So, just minor improvements like that. That's all I can think of off the top of my head.
I was telling you the other day, Steven, that I feel almost like I need to learn and start again with Android and Talkback because of these new gestures. You mentioned that, changing granularity, and there's all these, multi-finger gestures now, right? 3-finger swipe up and down. Does that change granularity or change options, and then left and right, and the 3-finger tap to bring up the Talkback menu? I'm still using the angular gestures every time I pick up an Android phone because I'm stuck back in the past, really. And it feels like I don't know, like I need a refresher, like I need reprogramming almost to
He definitely does,
gestures.
John. He definitely does.
Yeah,
in every sense.
What's happened over the years is, if you want to call it copying, fine, or if you want to call it like helping iOS users to transition over to Android,
That's a good spin.
They have added features from VoiceOver. So they added the multi-finger gestures originally, and this was just an Android problem because Android had so many different devices. Some were very cheap and didn't even have multi-tap functionality, and if they did have multi-touch, it was only 2-finger touch. So for the longest time, that's why we had angular gestures, because that was the best way to do multiple things on a screen where some devices just couldn't sense multiple fingers at one time. But that was a long time ago. So they have, I think it was in Android 11, so probably Talkback 9.1 or 9.2, they added multi-finger gestures, and a lot of the gestures are similar to what you would find in VoiceOver. They're not by default. Most of them are not similar. So if you want to make it an Apple experience, you could assign swipe down with 3 fingers to go to the next page. You could assign swipe up with 3 fingers previous page, that sort of thing. But you don't have to use the angle gestures if you don't want to. I'm glad they're still there because I use them all the time and I love them. But I also love having multi-finger gestures. It's just more possibilities to customize.
But I must admit, I think the point that Shaun's making is the one that I was thinking about as well, which is that it almost felt like this was an old way of doing it, that somehow this has been superseded and we should know this. And yes, there are other gestures that have been added. But what you're saying is that those angular gestures are still very common, still used, and still promoted to some degree. I mean, they're clearly still there and functional. I think they're brilliant. I mean, I actually really like the angular gestures because it adds. I remember the very first time I tried them, I could not get my head around it at all.
Our memories up, down, left, and right.
And you'd swipe down and you go left, and then that does. It didn't make sense. But then eventually, when I got it, I'm like, this is the only way I'm ever going to use an Android phone now because I love it. But you mentioned something else about being able to change things. One thing that has matured massively in Android is the customization. You've got so much more in Talkback now that you can do. You always could in Android more generally, but in Talkback, you have got much more now in terms of customization of gestures, even going to, the Braille display, and even a Bluetooth keyboard or a wired keyboard if you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I'm glad that it's customizable because I think Samsung's voice assistant, what they used prior to Talkback, was not customizable. Like, you couldn't assign the gestures to do what you wanted. So it's definitely something I like. I don't think Talkback is as feature rich or customizable as VoiceOver is. I feel like they have it backwards. Like, I feel Talkback has more of an iOS feel to it than, and I think VoiceOver has more of a Android feel to it. And what I mean by that is, I feel like VoiceOver is more user customizable, and you have much more voices to choose from. You have, someone told me recently, I don't know if this is in the beta or something, but you could have an equalizer for how you want the voice to sound. That just seems like so unnecessary. Like, that's something Android would do. Just throw in features because you can.
So true. Yeah.
So they feel backwards from each other to me. I don't think. I'm happy with what Talkback can do, but VoiceOver I feel like can do a lot more.
So interesting you say that, because we're constantly saying that, that there's a maturity between them both, and they almost feel like they're on a par. But it's so interesting to see someone who uses Android day in, day out actually point out those differences there, because it could be important, right? When I'm thinking about the customization of a screen reader on a mobile device, I'm thinking about, changing voice settings per app, depending on what app's up, custom gestures and assigning them to specific features or actions. Those are the important things to me. And I assumed that they were there already baked into Talkback, at least those two, which I consider the major customizations.
Yeah, and that's a good example, because Talkback, you can't customize things per app. It's just however you set it, that's how it's going to be.
System-wide.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel like all that will come, doesn't it? This is clearly an evolving screen reader. And look, I don't know about you. I personally wouldn't care either way if Google, as in Android and Talkback in particular, almost copied VoiceOver and VoiceOver copied Talkback, because there are benefits to both. Like, I would love angular gestures on my iPhone. You would like perhaps settings and more voices on Android. Okay, let's just make it happen. Why does it have to be a competition? Well, look, I've had time and spent quite a lot of time with Google's head of accessibility and Apple's head of accessibility, and on both occasions they say the same thing, which is, look, we just get along here. There's really no competition as far as we're concerned. Around certain features,
they're not going to
perhaps.
sue each other over patents for accessibility features.
No,
you would hope,
and that's
right?
a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, because look, for us, it's a basic level of access. So making this more accessible, so someone can make a decision. Hey, the new iPhone's too expensive. I can't afford it. I'm not buying it. I'm going to buy a cheaper Android phone because I feel I can get lots of cool stuff over there. And then when they do open up their Android phone, they find the same experience, as a blind user that a sighted person would. To me, that's, when you think about it in that sense, you tap the screen, an app opens up. The same thing should happen on both phones. Now, I know it does, but what I mean is that ultimately you want to have a mirror, essentially, of access for abled people as much as disabled people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe Talkback will get there someday. Talkback development seems a lot slower than VoiceOver development for whatever reason. They don't even have an open beta. It's a closed beta for people in just the US, Canada, and the UK. Like, you can't just get into the beta and start providing feedback in the same way you can on iOS. So
at least there's a group you can join. Just saying, there's a way you can get involved with the Trusted Tester program with Google that you can't do with Apple. That's sadly something that isn't open at all. So we just have to wait for the beta to come along and then feedback as best we can before the release happens. So I'm not suggesting for a second that Apple don't have blind people testing this. I know they employed blind people and they are testing with those people and others as well. They are doing it more in-house with their own team. And that's because Apple has that traditional, don't tell a soul anything until it's time to tell people thing, which is fine, although I don't love that aspect of Apple. But it seems with Google, they're more open to saying, look, let's open this up. Let's look outside of our bubble here and actually talk to blind people and get feedback. And you tell me, but I would imagine when a new version of Talkback comes out, we're not looking at as many bugs as we might see with iOS 18 coming up, for example. I mean, you tell me. Maybe I'm being fanciful here.
There are bugs, yeah. There are bugs.
You know what's so interesting to me in this conversation? It's almost the grass is greener. You know, I'm looking at Android thinking, I bet that hasn't got as many bugs, and it seems to get updated more than VoiceOver does. And you're saying the same thing back to me, John.
You notice the bugs you have to deal with, right? Every day. So
yeah.
Yeah. And I'm that way with everything. You know, I want a Pixel, then I get a Pixel, then I want to go back to my Samsung phone, then I go back to my. You're right. The grass is greener.
Do you want to weigh in this Samsung story? Because we were talking last week, of course. We had Michelle Raman from Android Authority on the show talking about reporting he had been doing on Samsung not getting Talkback 15. And we've had a couple of comments from people who I don't think have listened to the full story that Michelle put forward to us, suggesting this was nonsense. In fact, yes, of course, you can get Android Accessibility Suite on Google or a Samsung phone, which is true, but you can't seem to be able to enable Talkback without doing some kind of fancy developer command stuff in the background. First off, is that your experience? Is that true?
I would say most of what he said in that interview is true. The only thing that he might have been mistaken about is the fact that you can't have both versions functioning on a Samsung phone, because I have them both on my Samsung phone. I have one shortcut assigned to turn on Google's version and turn it off, and then I have another one assigned to turn on Samsung's version and turn it off. But what's true is that you can't get it to that point without connecting it to a computer and using Android debug bridge, developer software basically, to get rid of Samsung's Talkback, or Google's Talkback won't show up in the settings to enable. That's basically what it boils down to.
Okay, yeah, which is what he was saying. You need to go into basically the ADB developer box and do it that way. But so how have you got it running simultaneously, or you're able to choose between which one?
Yeah, because once you get rid of Samsung's, Google's will show up in the accessibility settings. You can then assign it to an accessibility shortcut, which, the iOS equivalent would be like assigning it to a triple tap of the side key, right?
Yeah.
And once it's assigned there, you could turn it on and off, and you can download Samsung's Talkback from the Galaxy Store and reinstall it, and then you'll have both. Okay. And you don't really need to get into Talkback settings through the accessibility settings, because you can, as long as you have it running, which you could turn on by the shortcut, you can then bring up the Talkback menu, go to Talkback settings there, and customize everything from within there. You don't really need to get to the accessibility settings. So you can get them both running, but you have to remove Samsung's to initially get Google's running.
And you simply just can't, uninstall the app through the default way you would.
Right. That's why you need to use the Android debug bridge. Yeah.
So why is that though? Why are they specifically
sort of jumping on you on this one? Why is this, John? Tell us.
So what's happening is Samsung's. So just to give a little history, Samsung used to have their own screen reader called Voice Assistant. And back in the day, you could choose to use Voice Assistant from the Galaxy Store, or you could choose to use Talkback from the Play Store, and you could switch back and forth between the two. But ever since they did this merging of screen readers, Samsung has insisted on using their own version of Talkback. And what it is they take Google's version and they add fixes to it. So they don't necessarily add their own features, but they just make it work better on their devices. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you're using Google's version of Talkback and you try to use Bixby, that's Samsung's assistant, you press and hold the side key, and as soon as the mic opens up, if you have audio ducking enabled, Talkback kind of interrupts it and Bixby stops listening. So you can't really use Bixby with audio ducking enabled. So that's something Samsung has fixed so that you can use Bixby. Another example would be the Samsung Galaxy Flip, the phone that folds shut and it has a little cover screen. Well, that cover screen is not, it's its own little UI basically, and Talkback kind of works with it, Google's Talkback. So you can swipe between items, you can double tap on things and all that. But if you want to bring up the Talkback menu, the menu won't appear on that screen. If you want to hide the screen, which equivalent to the screen curtain in iOS, you could do the gesture and it'll say screen hidden, but the cover screen, it doesn't hide. It stays wide open for everyone to see. But what is hidden is the main screen. And Google doesn't have a folding device of this form factor like a Flip. They have a Fold, one that opens up into like a tablet, but they don't have one that folds down into a
clamshell,
device
basically.
With basically a custom UI that has a custom UI on it. So Samsung wants to make sure these things are working on their device, and it comes with a cost, because they won't get the features right away. It takes Samsung, unlike Google, Samsung takes the iOS route and they release with the operating system. So you have to wait till you get the next version of Samsung's One UI before you get the next version of their Talkback. So they might release like 3 versions year round. So they're usually at least 4 months behind as far as features. So I would imagine possibly by the end of the year, but maybe in the spring, Samsung will have these Gemini features baked into their version of Samsung's Talkback. I wish they made it a little easier. Like, I wish you could just download Talkback and they just said, are you sure you want to use Google's Talkback instead of Samsung's Talkback? So if you want the new features at, because this is Android, right? We want a choice. Like, this is why we're on Android.
Exactly.
If we want to choose new features over stability, give us that option. So
I've got to ask you, John. So when you're turning on Talkback using Google's Android Talkback on your Samsung phone, are you noticing anything that isn't working properly? Are you noticing anything that essentially would be working properly if you were using Samsung's version of Talkback? Only
stuff related to Samsung's software. So like I mentioned, the Bixby has issues. The cover screen doesn't fully work correctly. But as far as like any of the features that Google has baked in, like Gemini works perfectly fine on the Samsung phone. It doesn't care what phone it's on. It will, if I do the gesture, it will send that portion of my screen to Gemini's server. So it will come back. It will tell me the description. It works perfectly fine. So it's just device-specific things that I don't think either Samsung doesn't trust Google to fix before they release, or Google's not interested in fixing before they release, because I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but that's basically what it boils down to.
Listen, it's been great talking to you, John. Now, you're part of the Blind Android Users podcast, is that right? And on their website as well, you contribute there?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, which is blindandroidusers.com, you can listen to our episodes, see where to subscribe. You could also just search for Blind Android Users on any podcast player, even Apple Podcasts if you want.
That's ironic.
Yeah, it is. You can also go to that website to, join our community. We have a Telegram group, we have an email list and Facebook group. But our partners are a website called accessibleandroid.com. And what we're hoping is that they're going to be like the AppleVis of Android, because there really is no AppleVis of Android for Android at this point. And, it's a community where you can submit content. They have written reviews of apps and phones. They write articles about, accessibility news. So, and 2 of their editors are regulars co-hosts on our podcast. So we kind of have a partnership with them. That's not our website exactly, but accessibleandroid.com. Definitely recommend you go check it out.
Yeah, I've looked for a long time for something like this, exactly for this reason, right? Because one of the benefits of AppleVis is that it encourages people who don't know about the operating system, who are new, to find out about things, to ask questions, to engage with a community that's thriving. And I do not believe for a second there is not a thriving Android community out there, but it's hard to find those people and find them in one place, and especially when you're starting out. And you often feel like if you can walk into the wrong place and suddenly end up asking questions to a bunch of serious people about this stuff, and they just don't want to know about you starting out in your journey and how does this gesture work and how do I do this. They're just not interested. You need a place where you can go that everybody's willing to contribute. AppleVis, of course, is one such place, but there needs to be an Android Viz. Absolutely. I'm all for it. There you go. That's the Stephen Scott seal of approval right there. And that is worth nothing. But listen, thank you so much, John, for coming on. People should definitely go check out the Blind Android Users podcast and accessibleandroid.com as well. Available on an internet near you. John Dyer, thank you so much for coming on today to Double Tap.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, John.
It's been fun.
Now go tell the Android people that we're nice people, okay?
All right.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much to everyone for getting in touch as you do. Keep in touch as well, and we'll catch you for another Double Tap tomorrow. Thanks, Shaun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.